Hey everybody, right over here is my 1973 Moto Guzzi Eldorado that we've been working on in the last few videos. Tonight, in this video, we're going to work on the electrics, getting all that sorted out, getting turn signals, headlights, all that stuff to work. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. I took this new headlight, put some paint on it. Obviously, it is way better shape, fuse box, distribution block, all that. So this is going to replace the existing one. All of this wiring went to this plug, which went to the vetter fairing. So I'm just going to peel all that out of there. Some of these go up to the dash. Some of these, I don't know what they do. So what is connected, I'm going to try to mark. And then I'm going to pull all this crap out of here and get the new headlight in and shove back in what belongs. Obviously, some of it's just bad. Like for instance, there's one wire right here. This is the only one hooked up on this whole mess, and it's twisted together. So I'm going to clean some of this stuff up and try to strip out what I know. What I know is kind of a disaster, and then we'll go from there. I don't know how much I can show because you're pretty much going to see my hand all in there. So I got the old headlight bucket out of there. Labeled everything. Made a little road map. Took out what went to the old fairing, cut a few that didn't go anywhere. I also went to the auto parts store, the green one, and found these grommets. It was this kit right here. Of course, I had to buy two of them because they only had one of each size in there. This one is in good enough shape, I'm not going to mess with it. And then I went in, inspected everything in here, and also marked the top, how they're bussed together. So these two are together, all those ones in the middle are, and then the ones on the end are separate. And I checked the headlight out and it actually works. So now we'll see if we can get this thing put back on there. Wasn't planning on really showing any of the wiring work because I figured it would be a lot of just boring stuff and be hard to make good video out of it that people wouldn't want to skip through. But I'm going to bore you anyway. I have the rear lights mounted and actually wired up. Underneath the fender there was some wire loom kind of tubing. I got the corrugated stuff at the parts store. So I replaced the wire loom under here with the corrugated plastic stuff with some grommets and got that back together. Got the battery back in it, pulled some stuff apart. I took the old hand controls. Actually said Yamaha on the bottom. It's around here somewhere. It was all screwed up. I got this generic one on Amazon for like 25 bucks. Comes with this connector, which I was just going to cut off, but I found where I could order the matching other side of that, kind of a kit for like 12 bucks. Should be here today. So I'm going to make the pigtail and connect all that. And I've pretty much chased down, like there's horn wires, turn signals, and there was also no horn on this for some reason. So I pulled out all kinds of extraneous wire and scotch locks and stuff that I wasn't going to need. Kind of got it kind of back to basics. These were the original turn signal wires that I just, instead of using them, they just scotch locked those fairing ones into it. So I've made a lot more progress than I thought. This generic hand control has a little peg, so I had to drill a hole in the handlebar to locate this. Not ideal because the clutch lever contacts it with that much to go, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. So once my matching connector gets here, I can keep moving forward. I also don't like how the headlight load all goes through the switch. So this doesn't have any relays other than for the starter. So I think I'm going to figure out a way to add relays for the horn and for the low beam and high beam, because this wiring is probably fine, but I just don't really want all that load going through the switch. it'll have a tendency to screw the switch up, or over a period of time can burn it up, melt it, etc. So I'm looking for a place to mount relays. I don't think they're going to fit in the headlight bucket. I really don't have anything to mount them to either. Plus the headlight, takes up a portion of that space. Under the dash I could probably fit them, but I don't want to drill any holes in this. I thought about mounting them to the back of there, but I don't think I have enough room once it's installed. About the only place I see is right here underneath the gas tank, kind of in this little void of the frame. So I'll figure out what I can do there, and I may end up doing that. So I've decided on the relay thing. I made this plate, welded some nuts to it just to make it easier to get in and out. It'll sit down the frame rail like this. I already drilled holes, and I can mount the 3 relays right along here. So I will get my relays mounted, wire what I can ahead of time, label them so I don't screw up and forget what I'm doing. Probably paint this before we really go all the way in and install it. I didn't film a good portion of the work I've been doing electrically, so this handlebar control came with the plug, which I was originally going to cut off and just crimp or solder the wires to where they needed to go. Of course, it didn't come with a color diagram either, and there were 2 plugs. Some kind folks on Amazon were kind enough to make a diagram of what they did. So I checked that all out, and that was straight up. And then I kind of had to make myself a little road map. This is not going to make much sense, but I decided to add relays for the high beam, the low beam, and the horn, because that's a lot of current. I didn't want to go through these tiny wires through the handlebar switch back out to the device. So I'm going to add relays for that. Also, I was able to find a kit that had the correct connectors in it and the pins, and I also bought the correct crimping tools, because I had just kind of been using the needle end of my strippers here and squeezing them, and that's okay, but these do a way better job, and for like 20 bucks, can't really beat that. They're kind of a pain because they're so small and big fat hands, but I've needed them for a while, so that wasn't a bad purchase. Then I also got a little jewelry set to remove the pins that you screw up on to get them back out of the connector. There's all kinds of things, and I've needed them too, so I mean, that was cheap too. So now I have them. So what I've managed to do is bring all the wires out to the devices I'm going to use, crimp in this plug, and I've tested each one as I've gone, and everything has worked so far. So now if I need to take the handlebars off, I can do that, and that thing should just snap together, and that will fit underneath the dash. So to avoid taking the load through the handlebar switches for the power for the lights and the horn, etc., I have come up with this little relay panel. I'll give a brief lesson here on what relays actually do, just in case not everybody knows. I'm trying to avoid the little Mr. Nerd setup to some extent, but I want you to be able to see this. So my meter's set on continuity, so when I touch these together it should beep. That means current would flow through there. There's a path, like obviously in metal. I have a motorcycle battery behind me. I'll hook this yellow wire up to the negative terminal. If I check between the two, I have 12 volts, whatever the battery's power is. So a relay, I know it sounds confusing, but it's really just an electrical switch, and these are 30 amp relays, so they can pass 30 amps through the power on these. So instead of all that power for the headlight and the horn, which are headlights, high beam, low beam, horn, which they consume a lot of power, between terminal 87 and terminal 30, that's the designation of a switch. So here is a coil, just a little tiny electrical, kind of makes a magnet, and it'll pull that switch closed. So there'll be power sitting here, you activate the device like the headlight or the horn, pulls that switch closed, and the power runs through the contacts in the relay and not through the switch. So all the switch you're doing, that's just going to pull that coil in. If I can do all this one-handed, but so I've already grounded. I've made this little panel. It's going to go on the bike. I've run a ground wire to all the grounds, and I'll ground that actually to the bolt on the back to get a good chassis ground. So when you apply power to the other coil wire, it'll make that switch close. These relays are a little different brand, but the coils across from each other, they're just made a little different. So if I put power on that, or put ground on that and power on this wire, you should hear it click. I don't know why the meter's doing that. It's kind of funky. Must be some electrical interference. Now if I hook the meter to it, so this would, one of these would be power coming in, one would be power going out. See, there's nothing right now. As soon as I activate this coil, this should beep. So now power can flow through those terminals. I hope I just confused the hell out of everybody. But these are all the same. They do the same function. They've just oriented them different because they're different brands purchased at different times. I may have already shown this, but the relay panel is going to live here under the tank. And I've made this bracket that I've already mounted them to, obviously. And that will bolt in right there, so it'll be protected under the tank. And then we will run these wires. Right here will be the coil wires for the relay. They'll run down, and then we'll run power from the fuses and the headlight bucket to power each device, and then back out to high beam, low beam, horn. I feel like that would be pretty boring for you to watch, so I'll get some of this put together and bring it back. So here's my relay panel. Got the high beams hooked up, and part of the low beam. I've used some of these 90 terminals. I can't use them all because the terminals will crash into each other. But pretty much for the coils, I've used the 90s. Seems to work pretty well. And I started back here with the high beam to keep my wire lengths somewhat manageable. So I have hooked up the power out to the low beam. Now I need to hook the power in. This is kind of what I've been doing, just trying to keep the wire length manageable. Cut it, strip it, then put the terminal on. Let me twist that. There we go. And then plug it in back here on the terminal 30. There we go. And that's our ground that once it'll screw into a chassis ground. But for right now, for testing, we can jumper it. You shouldn't be doing that. So for testing purposes, I actually have the key off back here, but this headlight switch has a power on, and now I'm switched to low beam. Here we can switch to high beam. Nothing happens when I turn the headlight switch on. but when I switch to low beam, you should hear that relay click. So apparently this power source for the headlight switch is hot all the time. I should probably find a power source for that is only hotkey on. And actually what we're hearing is we're hearing both the high and low beam relays clicking. We can hook up the headlight bulb and test it out. So what I've kind of figured out is to make dash lights and tail lights, I need to make this little bus bar right here hot. And it must have done it through some of that crap I ripped out in the old light switch, etc. So everything over here apparently is full-time hot. This is key on power, so I'll just take a jumper because all my below the fuses are full. And since this is only going to be for dash lights and tail light, I'll run this jumper kind of out of the way if I can, down, and power up this little bus bar down here to leave some room for when the headlight goes in. And that should give us key on power for dash light and tail light. That way that's always on. Alright, tail lights. I don't know if you can see it, but we do have dash lights. Probably see it when it's off. Tail light and dash lights. Okay. And then if we turn the key back on, turn the headlight switch on over here. Got low beams and high beams, and you can see it, the high beam indicator works too. That's all we lack is the horn. So I figured out my screw up with the dash lights, tail lights. Now I just need to power up the power wire for the horn relay, and I'll just grab power from up there. This is for the coil for the horn relay, so it doesn't need to be a huge wire. Oh, come on, get in there. Should be able to pick an open spot. This really doesn't need to be fused, so we'll just stab it in right there. So in theory, now I should be able to turn on the ignition, press the horn button, and hear the relay click. I do. So I should have a horn here tomorrow. And so as I was putting the wiring together, I determined that there were no horns on this bike. Couldn't find any with it, any of the parts either. So I happened to find these for a pair of them for 10 bucks. Well, 10 and change. It's a low tone and a high tone. They're a little tiny, so we'll see how they sound. I'm gonna have to make some sort of mounting bracket too. Okay, so I have the horns mounted down here. There was a bolt in the back little section. You probably can't even see it, but this is double walled. And there was a bolt in the back, had a ground attached to it, and what I believe to be the original horn remnants. Since I couldn't get this bolt through, took that off, pretty much attached all these grounds to a jumper wire temporarily, because they will bolt in now when I bolt the fuse box in. And I ran power to the horns through this red wire Got them grounded, etc. So now let's try it. Keys on. This is liable to make my dogs in the house go berserk. So anyway, horn's done. So that's where the horns ended up. I got the relay panel mounted in there. It has 2 bolts on the other side, and then all these wires will end up getting taped up in front of it anyway before the tank goes on. I ended up grounding all these grounds right here to the panel that actually holds the relay panel on. So there's the back side. So next I've ordered some parts and we'll try to figure out a brake light for the front brake. This is the original brake light switch located in the cable, and the wires, well, they go down through that hole and into there. And anyway, that thing does not work. I think it's either has broken pieces, missing pieces, and I cannot find a suitable replacement. So I decided I would try to adapt something up to the handlebar for the brake light switch, at least for the front brake. I took the original hand control and I found a set of brake light switches for a scooter, just generic ones on Amazon. We should just call this the Amazon build. I was able to mount it to the bottom of the hand control, and I drilled in this roll pin to actuate the switch. So right there, the switch is open, there it closes. This kit came with the left hand and right hand, so they're opposite. Has a little nub on the back. I drilled a hole also in there to hold it kind of located in place, and then drilled and tapped another hole right there to hold the bolt. And I tested it and it works. It has like 5mm terminals, so I had to go find some smaller terminals. So I'm going to make a little wiring harness to adapt from this to the factory wiring, because it's not long enough anyway, and we'll get this on the bike. Okay, so I got everything put back together, and the way the wire comes out of there is not ideal, but it'll work for now. Tie wrapped it, tied it back into the original harness, just put some connectors on there, cleaned up some of this, so I should be able to put the dash back on now. Let me show you that it works. You can hear it click. And we have a brake light. So other than the front turn signals, I believe all the wiring's back together. So I'll get all this buttoned back up, and then I have my turn signal wires for the front, and I need to make some brackets to bring the turn signals out and up. So they'd still blink awful fast. I thought having all of them hooked up would solve that, but apparently not. So that should conclude the wiring, at least for now. Everything's back together. Dash is back on. Headlights, high beam indicator. Even got the little flash to pass thing hooked up. And turn signal. I don't believe that light actually has anything hooked to it. That may be some of the police stuff, such as this switch. I did find a new knob. This is the ignition coil kill run, and this has nothing hooked to it. But anyway, so to recap, replaced the headlight, fuse box assembly, etc. Cleaned up wiring in there because all the current for all the devices ran through just the switches and the fuses. I didn't really like that, so I made a little relay panel, added that here underneath the fuel tank for the things that are going to consume a lot of current, headlights and the horn. And so all my factory switches were pretty much gone or destroyed. I used this hand control, which was an Amazon special, and adapted the plug into it, into all the original wiring to give me lights, high, low, turn signals, horn, and a flash to pass feature, which I hooked up. I don't think I'll be passing much with this thing, but anyway. Also, got all the dash lights to work. High beam, turn signals. They still blink rather fast. I thought by getting them all installed that would solve that, but it is what it is. So that works. Should be neutral, generator, and oil pressure lights. I also, since my front brake light switch was toast, under here I adapted a micro switch from a scooter to make my front brake light work, or my brake light work when the front brake is applied. Get all the electrics on the back on, tail light, turn signals, etc. In the process, removed that debris from what was there. So I think that'll conclude this video. Thanks for watching, subscribing. We'll see you on the next one.